Hello, I'm Rex Childhouse, and because things on the internet seem to lose their date reference, today is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. And being a little bit conservative, a little bit lazy, a little bit active, whatever, this portion of the video is probably going to be used to intro several site visits of our Wish of a Lifetime AARP regime trip from San Diego to Bastogne for the Battle of the Bulge battlefields and museums. I owe Wish of a Lifetime and AARP and regime a lot for granting this wish. This was probably one of the 5 most emotional events in my life. I'm married, 1 wife, 3 daughters, military career behind me, a lot of other things in my life, and this trip ranks in probably the top 5 most emotional events in my life. So let's get on with it. Thanks for watching.
The 101st Airborne Museum was right around the corner, probably 2 blocks away from our hotel. Really nice building, 3 floors, upper, a slightly elevated ground floor, 2 floors above that, and then a basement display. An older building and very nice repair with a garden area, whatever you want to call it. And in this picture of Joyce standing next to the L'Arche sign, which has bullet holes in it and is damaged by multiple bullet holes. In the lower left corner is the motor section out of a V2 rocket. And on the walls that Joyce was standing by are a couple of these pictures, and what caught my attention is there are the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, which is my dad's unit. Now, we don't know exactly where he was in the 506th, but we've got hospital records showing that he was in the 506th when he was injured in All-Size France. Interesting photos. As we go into the museum, this is an example of the signage we're going to find. It is virtually all bilingual, English and French, which is nice. There's some of it that's just pure German, some of it because of the nature of the presentation, stuff like that. A lot of displays set up like this one here. Looks like somebody had target practice at the Bastogne sign. Who knows why? We'll never know. Typical gear issued to the GIs, to the Allies during World War II. More of their equipment and some artillery rounds in here. They were big, they were huge, and people had to lug them around. A little bit more detail as we go around, and in a lot of these displays there are signs telling you what each one of those items are, or what the vast majority of it is. I kind of like this little tank. Looks like it's made out of wood. Somebody spent a lot of time making it. Very well crafted. Off on the right side is a World War II walkie-talkie, kind of big, so that's a 105mm shell. My dad loved the 155 and the 105s. He thought they were great guns. General Patton played a major role in Bastogne, driving the 3rd Armored into the relief, and here's materials from General George S. Patton, and there's a photo of him. So one of the questions is, or however you want to phrase it, who did what, when, where, why, how? And the Battle of Bulge, there were numerous units inside the perimeter, the encirclement. They were under the command of the 101st, but they were assembled from other areas. And this kind of identifies some of them and how they go. A lot of units inside the 101st, inside the perimeter of Bastogne defending it. So another display, some interesting stuff. I've got a flashlight just like that sitting in one of my drawers from my Navy career. They still issued them when I was on. My understanding is they probably still do. And stuff that's in here, and among other things, what's in here is a D-ration bar. Now, Donald R., if I can pronounce, Burgett, from 1st Company, 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, has some statements about the D-bar, and he doubts he ever ate one. Kind of interesting. A lot of the foods that were given to the GIs and are still given to the U.S. military are very high in calorie, very low in residue, so to speak. So you get a lot of energy and you don't have to go to the bathroom very often. Cigarettes and coffee, a major issue for the GIs. And Zippo lighters. They were trading materials, among other things. Look at the names in here. You'll probably see them growing up. LSMFT. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco. Maps. All sorts of maps throughout the display. And if you read them, you'll understand the chaos that was happening. Units didn't always know where they were. Units couldn't figure out a way to get to where they were supposed to be. If you read the books on the Battle of Bastogne, more chaos than in a normal battle, and it was just kind of fun. A lot of information around this museum about things that happened and how the units ended up there. And here's 4 panels, which you can stop the video obviously and read, I hope, that talk about the units that came into into the Battle of Bastogne, how they got there. Kind of interesting. When I say kind of interesting, it actually severely interests me. This is a map of how it was progressing at one point during the battle, and they were properly labeled. So I'm looking at where they've got the arrows and where the encirclement is. I'm assuming that this is actually possibly towards the end of the battle. Not sure, because I can't fully read the display. More stuff, a lot of stuff collected, donated, cataloged, presented. 48 star flag, because at this point Alaska and Hawaii were not part of the Union as states. They were territories, and my dad served in the Alaskan and Aleutian Territory. And in the entrance lobby, or the very first room you come up to, is a huge map, and this is the key to the map. And then we step off and we see this huge table, and this has got where the forces were on a particular day. This table is I'm going to say 5.5 by 8 feet in size, just guessing. The 506th Infantry Regiment was just about dead center in this wing. If you see the 101st Airborne symbol, the Screaming Eagle, just to the left of that is the 105th Infantry Regiment's area of control. Just to the right of where you see the 501st. This is the German order of battle for the Battle of the Bulge, if you wanted to decode it. And here's another look at that very big map. This has got a lot of detail in it. It took a lot of time to put together, but it's graphic. Shows how Bastogne was encircled, and shows the drop zone for the parachutists that came in, along with the supplies that were dropped in, and the landing zone for the gliders that came in during the engagement. There was humor during the war. Somebody was thirsty. Somebody went out to find something for him to drink, found an abandoned tavern, and decided to remove some of its wares. Kind of fun. As I said, the signs were, the signage, the information was usually English and French throughout the museum, which made it nice. Lots of weapons in this museum. Weapons are the tools of war, unfortunately. And then this one here shows how the 101st Airborne is set up. And somebody asked me, well, if your dad was in the 506th Infantry Regiment, why was he in the 101st? Because divisions are made up of regiments. Regiments are made up of companies. Companies are made up of platoons. Platoons are made up of squads. When you step above that, armies are made up of divisions, and corps are made up of armies. So it's a tier structure. And as we look at the second one here, it shows the 506 to how they were set up. My dad's paperwork that we do have say he was a plotter. He said he was an artillery coordinator, which would make sense. He was very good with math. And the units, the regiments, had their artillery coordinators with them so they could go call back and get infantry support. We can't verify exactly what Dad did because his records were destroyed, and unfortunately he died in '84. So we're left at guesses. I love payday candy bars, and they are gluten-free, so I can eat them. Cigarettes were a big thing for the GIs. Candy was a big thing for the GIs. Chewing gum, whatever. So a lot of stuff shows up. Knee high in the upper left, Coca-Cola. And I'm not sure what's in the right. I would have to try to figure it out. Choc-ola. Whatever that is. We'll leave that one alone. And then memorabilia that shows up from the 101st. I think this one is interesting because if you look at the notepad there, that appears to be a notepad. Somebody's ribbons, they go in a specific order when you put them on. I have my ribbons. And that was actually by this Captain Duffield, and it talks about how, as one of these civilian affairs guys, he started helping out this widow of Bastogne. Kind of interesting. The Army has civil affairs units. It has grave registration units. It can come in and control a area, and it controlled portions of Germany for quite a while. This one here is German prisoners of war. The GI in the right is obviously military police. Chances are the other guys are too, and these guys are being told the war is over. During World War II, it was not uncommon to take the German prisoners of war, send them back to the United States, and put them in towns like Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, where they could walk around the town and they could work. They weren't kept in prisons, in POW camps all the time. There was a bit of humor. This one here is a receipt from the 101st Airborne Division, the town of Bastogne, Luxembourg, Providence, Belgium. Condition used, but serviceable, kraut disinfected. Signed by Major General Middleton. There was a sense of humor going on, and it's what kept people going. So the parachute pack, that's kind of up in the upper, just to the right of center with the 101st Airborne patch sitting on it. That's a reserve pack that's worn in the chest. And talking to my dad about jumping out of airplanes, you had a main chute on your back. That was static line pulled. If that one didn't open, didn't function properly, you cut it away, and then you pulled your reserve chute, and you hoped that your reserve chute opened before you hit the ground. He said it probably wouldn't. Bastogne was cold, and here's some GIs that have gotten enough firewood to make a fire and maybe get a little heat. As I said in other videos, my dad did 2 years in Alaska in the Aleutians, fought in the Battle of Midway across the Aleutian Islands. Said he'd never been so cold as when he was sent to Bastogne, and part of that was because when he was sent to Bastogne, they were not given winter gear. They were pulled out of their rest and recovery camp. So here's a couple of medics off on the right hand side. If you look close, there's one kneeling to somebody down in the ground, and it's talking about medics. Believe me, armies don't go very far without medics because people get hurt. That's the object of combat. Now, we would visit the Bastogne barracks, and that's where this picture was probably taken. The guys on the left are peeling potatoes. That's what it looks like, and they're over a trash can. There's a big pot that the guy's stirring. Who knows what they're stirring? And the cook is wearing a pistol. So when it comes time, everybody becomes an infantryman. I kind of like this one here because it's talking about the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. They're on the march on the N15 to Novell. My dad's unit. So kind of took a liking to it. At this point, you aren't really sure because it's a black and white photo whether it's just wet and cold or if that's snow and ice. But if you notice, they're spaced out, they aren't clumped together, so if a shell goes off, you aren't going to lose a whole lot of them. Here's another picture of the 506th Infantry Regiment, and if you notice the bazookas and the bazooka rockets that are coming along in this line, these are guys are being equipped to fight tanks. And that goes probably because the Germans were using a lot of tanks during the Battle of the Bulge because they figured that the armor would overcome the infantry. And the way the Germans generally fought, that the tanks were supported by the infantry behind them. The way the Americans fought, the tanks were behind the infantry and supported the infantry. So different logics of how you're going to deploy your armor. And they just wanted to kill them. More miscellaneous stuff sitting around. Most of this appears to be German. A lot of stuff in this museum collected and displayed. A lot of it nicely labeled. I could have spent probably 3 days going through this thing. We had about 3 hours to do it. So one of the things that kind of caught me by surprise, because it's never come up in any of the books, is this is a Native American, what we would call an Indian. And it talks about the role they played in the Battle of the Bulge in the encirclement defense of Bastogne. Thought that was kind of cool. I've seen pictures like this before. I giggle and laugh. Here's a tank that probably weighs 110,000 pounds on its turret. They refer to it as turtled. It's upside down. The caption says that it was probably hit by airborne, by an air attack, whatever it was hit by, it blew it upside down. There are escape hatches in the bottom of these tanks. They are armored. Kind of wondering what happened to the crew, just because I'm curious. So my dad said that there were civilians inside Bastogne during the encirclement, and this picture kind of shows or verifies that. It says, these young Belgian little girls feel safe thanks to the protection from our liberators. Will they all survive the battle? And that should be a question mark. Obviously, several people survived the battle. My dad was lucky enough. Some of the other photos that come up, this is the damage that was done to the town during the battle. Not friendly, because the Germans fired directly onto the town to eliminate all the sheltering areas for the Allies. Kind of get a kick out of this one. Here's a cow walking down the street in Bastogne. I wondered how many GIs looked at that and wanted to have a rib roast. Kind of curious, but you see the vehicles, army vehicles parked throughout, and you look around and there is a fair amount of damage visible. Psychological warfare is not anything new. It's been around for a long time. During World War I, they had speakers that they blasted propaganda speeches at the opposing lines. During the Civil War, messages were left behind telling soldiers by both sides, what was happening to their wives, whatever else. And these are some of the posters, some of the psychological warfare material that was sent across. Kind of interesting to read. They were using everything they could to win. The guy who doesn't win is called a loser. The object of the game is to win the war. Now, this GI is armed to the teeth. Not only has he got a 30 caliber M1 service rifle, commonly called a Grand, he's also packing a 1911 on his left shoulder holster. He's packing binoculars. There's a knife somewhere in that photo, a couple of grenades, whatever else. My suspicion, it wasn't real well labeled. I didn't get a photo of it. I think this guy is either a scout or an observer, forward observer. War is messy, war is harmful. Several medic photos here, and this one here, he's taking care of a guy that we can't quite see, and just not having a fun time of it, so to speak. So we come up on this one, and you kind of have to laugh. Now, you wonder where the pipe that it's identified in the photo, I think. You wonder where the pipe that this private Lanier, where he got that pipe. Did he swap a pipe with the police officer or not? Interesting photo. He's carrying M1 carbine. Interesting photo. A lot of weapons through this museum, a lot of medals through this museum, a lot of auxiliary materials and whatever. So here's a mortar crew, 501st Infantry Regiment. The guy who's getting the coordinates on the phone, that's the guy on the right, and the guy on the left. Looking at where they are, I'm wondering if they are under a camouflage canopy, but they're about to send a mortar down range. Cigarettes, a major factor. Tobacco, a major factor. Zigzag cigarette papers, zipper cigarettes, I never heard of them. Remember the tin tobacco cans? Used to get those from a couple of our neighbors. A lot of cigarettes issued during World War II. They used to have what was, I know them as victory packs. There were either 3 or 5 cigarettes in one package, and they would be given out as, hey, you did a good job here, thanks. It's one way to go. The museum has a lot of documentation about how the units ended up in Bastogne, and that was pretty interesting. So they're talking about the 335th and 969th Field Artillery Battalions during World War I. Then they were deactivated, and then they were reactivated and brought back into Bastogne. So they're interested in preserving history, which is kind of cool. That's the purpose of the museum. The proximity fuse, which is shown here, and there's a kind of has me slowed down for a minute. Sorry, this is somewhat emotional. That wrench on the top of the shell is an arming wrench for the nose of the fuse, for the nose of the projectile. The proximity fuse was a fuse that you could set to go off a specific distance from your target. So you could set these off to go off 100 feet above the ground as it was coming down. Therefore you got an air burst. It wasn't didn't have to worry about time. If you were to set it by time and you were off by 1 second, it was a ground burst, ground impact, or it burst so high that it was not truly effective. Proximity fuse was first used in the Battle of the Bulge, according to my reading. At that point, it had been kept under close wraps as a top secret weapon because they didn't want the Germans to find out how it worked, what it was, until they actually needed it. It was put into combat by General McAuliffe without permission, but it was appropriate for his use. Lots of photos around the museum. Here are some of the German equipment that was in the Battle of the Bulge. Some of it's relatively new. By new, I mean 1944, 43, 44, 45, 44 development. Can't be in 45 because Battle of the Bulge started in 44. Some of it kind of old. And then other photos. A lot of photos around the museums, almost all of them nicely titled so you knew what you were looking at. One of the other things that surprised me, because it's not brought out in the books, was this is a black soldier working with the artillery unit, and the artillery unit was a black unit with white officers, and this guy's lugging a 155 shell. The box at his feet is labeled as such, so this was not light. They had a history of, in reading some of the other documents, they sang songs to maintain the rhythm of loading, firing, unloading, reloading the weapons. So it was kind of interesting how that played out. And artillery, these are howitzers. Looks like, I'm guessing they're 155s. My dad loved the 105 and the 155 howitzers. He thought they were good. Another dressed soldier. This guy's carrying his weapon upside down, which is appropriate for foul weather. Water doesn't get in the muzzle and drown you, but he's in cold weather gear with a lot of ammunition. He's missing his infantry gloves, which have trigger fingers that you can come out and operate. Lots of displays of how these guys fought the war. Mortar sitting off in the foreground, people walking around in their heavy winter clothes because it finally got up to them so they could get cold. To tell you that there was a lot of reading that was interesting would be an understatement, and Joyce found it as interesting as I did. I will tell you that at the end of this tour in Bastogne, we were both emotionally and physically exhausted. Interesting displays. This one has some damaged material from a glider that crashed in the Bastogne area during the Battle of the Bulge. A couple of German soldiers conversing about something. They're in a basement, it looks like, or in a store, not sure. And one of the restaurants, one of the bars is open, and they're serving drinks, and looks like it's happy time. Wonder where. More of the information about how they came into World War II. And this one's talking about Pathfinders. The Pathfinder by designation was first used during World War II. My dad talked about Pathfinders, guys jumping in, carrying special lights and beacons for the airplanes to find the drop zones, because frequently they were being dropped at night, and you can't see a whole lot of structures at night from the sky in territory you've never flown over before. In the staircase, they've got a paratrooper hanging, showing what he would look like as he came down, and he's facing us, and you see there's a reserve chute on his chest. And we saw the picture of the reserve chute earlier. His main chute's been deployed. He's grabbing the risers. The main chute's hanging over by the windows. War is fatal, and it was cold. These guys were frozen. So they're seeking, these JIs are seeking shelter in a building as they can, both to protect them and provide some degree of warmth, some degree of break from the weather. You can see it's not great sunny weather. and this just exemplifies it. These soldiers are walking through snow, so you could find your enemy simply by following the tracks through the snow if you wanted to get really cold. One of the things in this photo that caught me of interest is the telephone pole in the background. There's a lot of telephone lines going in here. And here's a mortarman waiting for orders to fire his 81mm mortar, only because I took a picture of it, so I know it's an 81mm mortar. And he's waiting to send mortar rounds downrange. A lot of black and white photos through here that were taken at the time, which was nice. GIs escorting German prisoners of war. And in this one, German POWs are being used to dig graves for both German graves and American graves. Use the manpower you've got when you've got it. You're going to need it. A tank destroyer is a light, fast, armored tank which usually fires, as I understand it, a special round which is harder on the barrel than the normal tank rounds. So they are quote-unquote specially equipped. And this one here is just one of the pictures that was in the museum. And here's a dead German Tiger tank. It's a massive structure. There's actually two people in front of this tank, and it dwarfs both of them. So at this point, I will tell you that I have over 300 photos of the 101st Airborne Museum. I've given you a sample of them. I could probably do a 24-hour display. I'm not going to do that. I thought the 101st Airborne Museum was outstanding. One of their curators is Johnny. He communicated with us ahead of time. He met us, gave us some information about my dad's unit and where they fought. And as I said, going through this building, seeing what the cost of war was, knowing someone who did it, having participated in combat actions not in the same manner as shown here, this was emotionally draining. Got in several discussions. There was a group of 5 or 6 Army soldiers from the Netherlands down there. Talked to them for 15-20 minutes about why we were down there, why they were down there, why we were down there. Talked to several other groups while we were in the museum. It was a great place to visit. I think I could spend 3 days there going and reading the displays rather than look at it, grab a photo of the signage, and then move on, because we were on a timeline. We were going to the Bastogne barracks after this, and we kind of had to get moving. So we moved on. I will tell you, this was a fantastic museum to visit. And thanks for watching. The next one is going to be on the Bastogne barracks. Thanks for watching. Bye.